keeping an eye on Iowa's pocketbook with at least one state agency now under additional scrutiny. The fallout from the Iowa Communications Network controversy and what lawmakers may do about it on this edition of Iowa Press.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
I'm a dad.
I am a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a kid at heart. I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.
For decades, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. Now celebrating more than 40 years of broadcast excellence on statewide Iowa Public Television. This is the Friday, February 16 edition of Iowa Press. Here is David Yepsen.
When news reports circulated last month that the head of the Iowa Communications Network was fired under controversial circumstances, including allegations of misspent funds, lots of questions were raised. The proper role of legislative oversight over state agencies and their methods of spending state tax dollars are once again in the spotlight. For some insight, we welcome two members of the Iowa House Oversight Committee. Chairman Bobby Kaufmann, a Republican from Wilton, and Representative Vicki Lensing, a Democrat from Iowa City. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for
taking
having
time
us.
to be with us. Across the table, James Lynch is political writer for the Gazette, and Kay Henderson is news director at Radio Iowa.
Representative Kaufmann, let's explain to Iowans how this happened. You have the director of an agency that got the state to pay for his vacation in Belize. He got the state to pay for all sorts of video equipment transferred to his home in Marion. He drove from Marion to Iowa City to commute to the job, and the state paid for that, which is expressly forbidden in state HR policy. How in the world do you explain to Iowa taxpayers that this stuff happened?
Well, and don't forget, Kay, that he also was able to hire someone to a position for which she was not qualified and then subsequently give her raises that I believe were completely unjustified. And I think it comes down to the simple truth of he was able to circumvent basic internal controls, and he was able to monopolize the ability to sign off on expenses, to decide who could work on what particular project, where the money came from, where the money flowed to, and who had the oversight. He was able to consolidate all of this power to himself.
Representative Lensing, during a committee meeting that the oversight panel had to examine this, you asked, is this happening elsewhere?
Well, it's a concern. I think, and Bobby referred to the director, the former executive director, and I think we question, how did he get so far and no one noticed? And he was able to, and I hate to say manipulate, but he certainly was able to control finances, information, and people, and allowed this to happen, which then raises the question, if you get the wrong person in the wrong place, could this happen again? And one of the things I think that we are struggling with is, how did he get so far? He started in the ICN and worked his way up, and I don't think he exhibited some of these actions until he was in charge, but then Bobby gave a list of the things that he did, and when we've talked to people who worked in ICN around him, I think that he was able to, I think they were afraid for their jobs, and so it was very hard to push back against him. And then you wonder, could that be created in other places?
You've both talked about the internal controls and how he was able to circumvent them. So what safeguards need to be put in place to prevent this from happening again? Representative Lensing?
Well, I think we look at hiring practices and trying to understand how that happens. I also think financial reporting seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle. And I think when others serve on boards, public or private, and you have financial reports, there are things you should question, you should look at and ask questions about. But I think it's also how the financial reports are arranged. And when we last had people in, I asked about the financial reports. You would want to see not only maybe quarterly or month-to-date spending, but also year-to-date, and they just get numbers and no detail. And usually there's more lines on a financial report, and if not, you should ask about them. And I think too, so it's not just how you put these people in place through hiring, but it's the board's responsibility, and maybe looking at how, and we certainly have a lot of boards in this state, what responsibilities do they have, what training do they get, so that the right questions are asked.
Representative Kaufmann, the state auditor gave you some recommendations to the committee. Are those recommendations going to be enacted, put in place, or do you have other recommendations from the Oversight Committee that will come up as bills in the legislature?
Yes, the Oversight Committee plans on doing several study bills. One of them is in regards to what Representative Lensing just said, that I agree with her, that hiring practices and how we elevate people, whether it's from external in the population or whether it's elevating them within departments, there's a different level of scrutiny that I think lends an atmosphere that could allow this to happen in other departments. Furthermore, the auditor had an excellent recommendation that I plan on putting in a study bill, which she has requested that in her state auditor's code section, she be given explicit authority to prevent whistleblowers' identities from being put out there, because she feels that people were not able to safely be able to come to her, like Representative Lensing had said, and feel like they could possibly get fired.
What makes you think this is not happening in other agencies besides the Communications Network?
I would say there's no way to guarantee that, but our high-profile investigation should put anybody that might be doing this or think about doing this on notice, that if you attempt to misuse taxpayer dollars like this, we're going to come at you with everything we have.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree, and I also think, the process for a lot of department heads, they have to go through Senate confirmation, as did this, but I think the Senate has been a little more active. This was a board selection of this person to be the head of this agency, and also, so I don't think they maybe had the same level of scrutiny that if you had given it to the Senate that they would have had, but it certainly, I think, makes you think about different departments and different agencies and how they're set up that maybe we should give a look at.
Representative Lensing, you mentioned that if you're a member of a public board, a board that oversees state spending, that you should not be asleep at the switch.
Right.
How did this board, which gets paid anywhere from $14,000 a year, I believe up to $20,000 a year, how did they earn their money managing this agency?
That's a good question, and we haven't had an opportunity yet to talk to any board members. They're certainly on the list, I think, of people that we would like to talk to. But I think the level of, again, I struggle. I don't know if intimidation is the right word, but certainly that employees felt. You have to wonder, did board members also feel that way? Or were board members engaged? Did they just show up for a board meeting ever so often? And did they know about any of this, or did they have any hint? And also with the employment system, the hierarchy of the people who worked at ICN, how much did they interact? And so I think we have a lot of questions that we just haven't had an opportunity to ask yet.
Do you suspect, Representative Kaufmann, that the board members are complicit in any way?
I would not say that at this time, but I will say that they are on the list to come into our oversight meeting very soon. And I would concur with Representative Lensing, although I will use the word intimidation, because that's how I would describe what we were told. People felt like if they were bringing up irregularities in Mr. Lombard's behavior, they would then be possibly threatened with having those responsibilities taken away from them and given to him. So I believe people did not feel like they could come to him, or, as one of the members said, that they couldn't even talk to the board.
You mentioned that these board members hire the director. Why doesn't this person report to the governor? Most state agency heads ultimately work for the executive branch. Why is this person not accountable to a governor?
I think we were surprised when we learned that the board was where this power was, or responsibility was. And I'm not sure how that happened, but I think it happened when it was being set up. I think it always has been that way. And so it's never a problem until it's a problem.
You had State Auditor Mary Mosman come in and explain her audit, which laid out the allegations against this person who was in charge of the Iowa Communications Network. She served on the board. She was an ex officio member. Why didn't she pick this up and Is this going to hurt her chance at re-election, Representative Kaufmann?
I don't think so at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I think her strong response and her proactivity in giving us legislation is going to help her. She was subjected to the same situation that all the other board members were, and that is this individual who is described as charming, but also was using intimidation tactics to keep employees from talking, was purposely able to consolidate power and keep any information about his wrongdoings from everybody, including her.
But we read audits from the state auditor all the time where she's advising small town X to step up its oversight of the city clerk who just stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why wasn't someone equipped as she is with, you know, a CPA's mindset able to see through this?
Well, she had showed us that several years in a row she had audited the ICN and they didn't have any issues. This, like Representative Lensing had said, this gentleman had only started to act like this. His behavior only changed in that last year. And so I think she had been proactive, and this guy was able to consolidate all these bad doings into 1 year.
Representative Lensing, you look like you were going to respond.
Well, I also think he controlled all the financial information. So since he was the one supplying the information, it was hard for anyone under him to question it because he was releasing what he wanted to release and could therefore control how the picture looked.
Let's get to the $64 question, or in this case, the $380,000 question. Is the state ever going to get its money back, Representative Kaufmann?
Well, the trailers were confiscated, and when they found out that he had put stuff on eBay, which is a brazenly arrogant act, they were able to get some of that back and put them through the proper selling channels.
Representative, when you say trailers, explain to our viewers what you're talking about here.
So Mr. Lombard had used taxpayer money to purchase 2 trailers with mobile equipment on them, and he had them delivered to his residence. He then had 15 items, to my understanding so far, that they've found that were put on eBay and sold, but the monies were never deposited into the state bank accounts. That was where the red flag was raised that caused the auditor to be flagged.
Do you think we'll get the money back, Representative Lensing?
Well, I think there will be certainly opportunities. I think part of it has come back, but I think a further investigation probably, and certainly the DCI is involved, but if they do an inventory of things at his home that maybe shouldn't be at his home and evaluate them, I would think there would be some process that the state could recover more.
Representative, I want to be clear. Do you think Democrats, do you think your party has now got a better shot at defeating the state auditor as a result of this?
No, I wouldn't say so. You know, first, she came in and explained there are different types of audits that are done. And so I think sitting on the board as she did, she was subject to the same sort of financial misinformation that they were, and there were no red flags. You know, as you see the numbers, like I said, the director was the one giving the numbers, and so she, you know, for the time she was on the board, coming in monthly for a meeting or quarterly or whatever it was, I don't think there would have been any way for her to know that. So I don't feel that she was negligent in what she did.
Representative Kaufmann, we've also discovered that the auditor and the state treasurer are on dozens of boards, and if they spent their time going to these board meetings, they'd hardly have time to do their real job. Do you need to go through these boards and commissions and sort of rearrange things so that the board members have a clearer idea of what their responsibility is, and maybe remove some people who are ex officio members, non-voting members?
I do believe so. I don't think it's fair to either of them to be expected to attend dozens of meetings while also executing the job that they were elected to do. So the answer is yes, I believe that review should be done.
You mentioned, Representative Kaufmann, about whistleblower protection and having the state auditor and her office sort of the repository for that protection. Representative Lensing, why the state auditor? Why not the Government Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives?
Well, I think in this case, because it is financial, it makes sense to have it there. But I think going back in time, we have passed whistleblower legislation over the years I've been there, and it's each with a different circumstance, which kind of directs where it should go. But I think the important thing is that there needs to be whistleblower protection for whoever comes forward on whatever issue that there are improprieties going on at the state level. And so I appreciate that the auditor's office thought that this would be a good thing in case there is anything else going on, that people would have a place to go for that.
Representative Lensing, do you have confidence in the people who are there at the ICN now overseeing its management?
Well, I think so. It's not like we've met quite a few of them, but the ones who've been in, I think they are shocked and frustrated, and I think because they were manipulated, I think there's a level of trust that has to be rebuilt with whoever comes in, and hopefully the leadership that will assume the responsibilities for the agency will be able to create a better feeling amongst the employees, and also at least better communication, and get away from some of this scandal that has put a black mark on them.
Well, let's look at a larger question here. Why do we need this ICN? Representative Kaufmann, why doesn't the state get rid of it, sell it? I mean, there's a more fundamental question here than whether the numbers all add up. It's whether we need to be doing this anyway.
Well, there has been a lot of conversation about whether it should be for sale. So I can announce today that we'll hold a live auction right now to sell it right here on this show. No, I just wanted to give my speaker a blood pressure spike. But all kidding aside, there's 3,300 miles of fiber optic cable that the state owns. They service 1,000 accounts and 1,000 customers with 7,300 accounts. We have a valuable asset. I think the question is, how can we better utilize it? And there have been a lot of people bringing a lot of different ideas up, including leasing to local municipalities to be able to get fiber optic network out to rural Iowa.
But what do other states do? I mean, yeah, you're servicing a lot of state agencies. By law, they can't go anywhere else, some of them. I mean, what do other states do? What do other National Guards do for their telecommunications services? Why not turn it over to the private sector?
That is a great question. I can't tell you what other states have done. If you would have asked me a month ago what the ICN did, I wouldn't have been able to answer that. This is a whole new world for me that I'm still readily learning, but there are a lot of people coming out of the woodwork trying to educate us on what they do. And
Representative Lensing, what do you say? Why don't we just tape the ends, shut it down?
Well, this issue has come up during the time that I've served in the legislature, and it's funny, after this came up, I went back into my files and found the arguments I've had for when this has been proposed in the past to sell the ICN, and I don't think my arguments have changed. They provide great service to cities and counties and schools, and how would we undo that? Would be the first thing. If we sell it, do we have a plan for these users? And also, I remember going out to tour the National Guard and seeing how their communication system relied on the ICN, and how that just globally how they use it. And so I think we need to educate our colleagues also about what the ICN does.
But why take the National Guard? They say they need to have it. Well, what do National Guards in other states do? We're the only state that has an ICN like this. Why doesn't the National Guard buy their telecommunications services the way National Guards do in other states? Or why doesn't the federal government pay for it, since this is a matter of the national defense?
Well, I believe the Homeland Security put out an RFP for the National Guard on whether to use it. So I think they had bids come in, and they chose the ICN because they thought it was the best fit. And the security that they deliver, the service they deliver, they must be very satisfied with it.
And is that still legitimate and valid today? The telecommunications industry has changed enormously since the ICN was started. There's just more fiber, there's more digital, there's just more telecommunications than ever before. Couldn't they get a better deal by going out into the private sector and seeing what they could get?
Apparently they didn't think so. I don't know. And I think as long as we talk about technology, what we say today does change tomorrow. I know that the ICN tries to upgrade and stay current, and the users also. But I think a lot of it is tied to the money that we give them, the state gives all these agencies to use, because it's a fee for service that they have to make sure that they can justify.
Representative, what about the private sector? If you put this up for bid to sell it, if you put it on the market, aren't you going to create an entity that competes with the very local telephone companies that are complaining about this now? Why would Republicans want to put private businesses in jeopardy?
Well, I think we would be looking for whoever can provide the best service at the best price. And a little-known component of the current ICN system is that if any of the users, K-12 schools, community colleges, et cetera, find a private provider that's cheaper and better service, they don't have to request the ICN's permission. They can just use them. So I think that competition already exists.
And one last thing. I mean, I don't hear either of you saying we ought to get out of this business, that we ought to just shut it down. We don't need it.
I believe that there are ways to make it better, and I believe there are ways to make more competition. Flat out selling it right now is not where I'm at.
I agree.
Government oversight has a broad sphere of interest, I guess. What else is the House Government Oversight Committee working on, Representative Kaufmann? Are there other issues that you're pursuing?
Well, there was a very This whole ICN situation came at a very timely point. I had just arrived home after our oversight meeting with Director Foxhoven, where we've been looking into child care placement with the Department of Human Services, and I thought we were making great progress. I thought we had had a good update, made some good changes, and then bam, this ICN situation happens that very evening. So right now we are completely consumed by the ICN issue because it's a big deal. It's the biggest state tax scandal since CTEC as far as I'm concerned, but we do still like to do other things and hope that we can wrap this up to pursue other goals.
Representative Lensing, talk about the work you did with the DHS and Director Foxhoven on child placement.
Well, I think there again, the issue came to light because of a tragedy of a young girl who lost her life. And it's very sad when the state only pays attention when these things happen. But I think it certainly alerted us to the fact that within the foster care system, within child placement, there need to be some changes. And we were just beginning to understand maybe what we needed to do and got interrupted, as Representative Kaufmann said. So I hope we get back to that because I don't think we're done with that issue yet.
So what do you need to do?
I think there needs to be some I hate to say oversight, but there needs to be oversight for parents who have foster children. I think there needs to be, and I think Director Foxhoven seemed to agree with that there needs to be at least someone checking on them at least once a year, maybe a healthcare provider that would do a check at their home to make sure that they're all right. Because in all of these instances, these children were both mentally and physically not in good health.
As I understand it, the director has ordered parents who adopt a child out of foster care and choose to homeschool that child to have at least one doctor's visit per year. You're saying someone needs to go into the home rather than that sort of outside the home evaluation.
I think that would be more helpful. I'm sure the families would find that intrusive, but I think when these situations were discovered, the only people in and out were law enforcement, and sometimes it was too late then.
Both of these issues, the ICN and the way the state manages children, raise the question, where's the legislature? We've been asking you about the boards and agency officials, the governors. What about you? What about the legislature? Are you guys up to the task here, given that you're a part-time legislature? Do you have the staff that you need? Do you need to look at yourselves so you can say to the taxpayers, yeah, we're doing our job in oversight?
Well, I believe we are up to the task, and as you can see today, we work well together as Democrats and Republicans in oversight. There is no real political party divisions in the Oversight Committee, and I think we can point to a change we've already been able to enact. With what Representative Lensing was referring to, that was the recommendation of the Oversight Committee to make sure that if you're receiving a taxpayer check to take care of a child, you have to make sure that they are getting basic health care. That was a legislative recommendation they've been able to enact administratively. Then you look at the ICN, we've received recommendations from the auditor. We're going to pass legislation to honor that. So I think that we're a committee that investigates, but also recommends legislation to fix problems.
Representative, do you have the tools in your toolbox that you need? Do you think the legislature and your oversight committee need more staff, need more authority, anything so that you can prevent this from happening again?
I think our biggest enemy is time. We never seem to have enough time, and we will start down one path when something else happens, like the ICN, but that is historically what has happened to this committee. I've served on it for 18 years now, and we have had some serious investigations, and we seem to find a way to do our job and make it better.
We've only got 2 minutes left, and I want to completely change the subject in light of what happened last week in Florida, the shootings there. Mr. Chairman, do you see anything on the horizon that will change in the legislature as a result of this Florida shooting? Do you anticipate the legislature doing anything any different?
No, I don't believe so. The biggest thing I try to talk about this with people is I've never met a criminal who has ill intent that has said, oh, shucks, the legislature did this, so I'm not going to go do that. I think we need to focus on mental health and the flags that continually pop up in every single one of these tragedies where somebody missed something.
Representative Lensing, what do you think? The legislature do anything different here as a result?
I don't know if it's legislature or Congress. I don't know who can do anything. I think the public shares the pain that we all feel, that it seems like weekly or we are reading of these tragedies, and it doesn't seem to matter what we do. I think if someone wants to have access to a firearm, they will get it. And if mental health is the flag, we've been talking about more need for mental health services, but that alone won't do it.
Well, so, Mr. Chairman, what are you going to do about mental health? Republicans always, oh, it's mental health. We can't worry. We don't want to focus on gun control. That's anathema to your Second Amendment constituency. What about mental health?
Well, I support the governor's initiative in her State of the State where she called for regional mental health centers, because we have this never-ending cycle of people going to prison, people going to hospitals, and those two entities being mental health facilities. I think having care centers where people can get right will go a long way.
And Representative, should schools be required to develop security plans, put them in place? Should we ask them to spend more money on hardening their assets, locks and that sort of thing?
Well, I think it's a sad thing that schools feel that they need to. I think because of all of the tragedies that have happened over the years, a lot of schools have got protocols in place. And to what extent, I think that's their decision based on their locality. I think it's the reality of the world right now.
There is a bill in the Senate that would require schools to have some sort of protocol for an active shooter situation. 15% of schools don't have it. Will the House pass that bill?
I'd like to see it passed, yes.
Representative?
I'd certainly like to see it investigated.
Okay. I got to go. We're out of time. Thank you both for being with us today.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. We'll be back with another edition of Iowa Press next week at our regular times, Friday night at 7:30 and Sunday at noon on our main IPTV channel, with a rebroadcast on our .3 World channel Saturday morning at 8:30. For all of us here at Iowa Public Television, I'm David Yepsen. Thanks for joining us today.
Funding for Iowa Press was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation, the Associated General Contractors of Iowa, the public's partner in building Iowa's highway, bridge, and municipal utility infrastructure.
I'm a dad.
I am a mom.
I'm a kid.
I'm a kid at heart. I'm a banker.
I'm an Iowa banker.
No matter who you are, there is an Iowa banker who is ready to help you get where you want to go. Iowa Bankers, allowing you to discover the genuine difference of Iowa banks.